The first rule of the Viether Dominion was simple. Never look upon the face of the princess. The second rule was what happened if you did. Captain Elias Kane stood in the grand chamber of the Viether High Council, the weight of 100 alien stares pressing down on him. The chamber, carved from obsidian and lined with flowing strands of bioluminescent silk, shimmered with eerie golden light. Silence reigned, broken only by the slow, deliberate steps of Princess Xalara as she entered. She was draped in the ceremonial void-black robes of her people, her face hidden beneath the shrouding veil that no living being had ever seen beyond the walls of the Dominion. To the rest of the galaxy, she was a phantom, a legend wrapped in superstition. The stories were endless. To see her face was to know madness. To meet her eyes was to invite death. Civilizations that had broken these laws had burned. Their rulers found hollowed-out husks, their minds shattered. Whether it was a curse, technology, or something worse, no one dared challenge it. Until now, Kane had never believed in curses. He believed in strategy, in reading a room, in pushing where others retreated. And right now, he could feel the currents of fear running through the Viether officials around him. The way their gazes flicked between him and Xalara, the barely concealed tremble in their otherwise poised hands. They feared him, not because of his weapons, not because of humanity's growing reputation among the stars, but because humans were unpredictable. They could not control what a human might do. He had been sent as an envoy, but diplomacy had never been his strong suit. The real mission, the one buried in whispers before he left Earth, had been clear. Find out why they hide her face. Find out the truth, ***. Xalara moved with an ethereal grace, her voice smooth as polished glass. Captain Kane of the Terran Union, you stand before the Dominion as a guest. Will you abide by our laws? A loaded question. A trap woven in silk and tradition. Kane smiled, the kind of smile that made bureaucrats nervous. I respect all cultures, he said, choosing his words with deliberate ease. But I also believe fear is the greatest weapon of all. And I don't play by the rules of fear. Gasps rippled through the gathered council members. Some recoiled as if he had physically struck them. Others stared in frozen horror. The air in the chamber thickened. Xalara stood motionless, unreadable behind her veil. Reckless words, she said softly. Truthful ones, Kane countered. The silence stretched. The tension became suffocating. Somewhere in the chamber, a guard's hand twitched toward his weapon. Kane's muscles coiled, his instincts calculating the distance, the reaction time, the moment everything would shatter. Then, something happened that no one in the room expected. Xalara took a step closer. Not the measured, controlled pace of royalty, but something almost hesitant. The energy in the room shifted. The unreadable became uncertain. And for the first time in recorded history, Princess Xalara of the Viether Dominion looked directly at a foreigner. Not through intermediaries. Not through emissaries. Directly. At. A chill ran down Kane's spine. Not from fear, but from the sheer weight of history collapsing in real time. His heartbeat slowed. His breathing steadied. His every instinct screamed at him to do nothing, to hold, to wait. Instead, he did the impossible. He met her gaze. The room erupted in chaos. The moment Elias Kane met Princess Xalara's gaze, the universe held its breath. A second stretched into eternity as the weight of centuries of fear, law, and myth collapsed around them. Then the chamber exploded into motion. Guards lunged forward, weapons drawn, shouting in their native tongue. Council members recoiled, some shielding their faces, as if the mere act of witnessing this heresy would taint them. The high priest of the Dominion collapsed to his knees, murmuring prayers to whatever unseen force they believed governed their fate. Kane remained still. He had spent his life in war zones, on the front lines of interstellar diplomacy, where a single word or twitch of the hand could determine whether entire species lived or died. But this was different. He wasn't just breaking a law. He was unraveling something deeper, something embedded in the very fabric of the Dominion's identity. Xalara did not flinch. She did not recoil. She stood there unmoving, the dim glow of the chamber's golden lights reflecting off the edges of her obsidian veil. He couldn't see her expression, but he felt the weight of her gaze through the delicate fabric. And then, after a moment that defied reason, she turned and spoke. "Take him." The words were calm, emotionless, yet they hit with the force of a gunshot. Hands gripped Kane's arms before he had the chance to react. The Viator soldiers were fast, too fast. They moved in perfect synchronicity, their pale hands cold against his skin as they forced him to his knees. A sharp pain radiated through his joints, but he barely registered it. His mind was focused on her. Xalara's posture remained unchanged, but something in the room had shifted. The fear in the air thickened, not from Kane's defiance, but from something else. Something unspoken. He had expected immediate execution, a swift and brutal display of power to silence the scandal before it could spread. But that wasn't what happened. Instead, the guards dragged him through the chamber, past towering pillars of alien stone, past trembling courtiers who refused to meet his eyes. Kane did not struggle. He observed. The way Xalara turned away, just a fraction too late. The flicker of hesitation in her stance. The tension in the shoulders of the Viator enforcers. The way no one, not even the high priest, could look at her directly. This wasn't just about him breaking a law. This was something more. The corridors of the palace were silent as the guards led him deeper into its labyrinthine depths. No windows. No sound beyond the soft hum of alien machinery pulsing through the walls. Kane counted the turns, memorized the path. He had been in enough prisons to know when a cell was meant to be temporary or permanent. A massive obsidian door loomed ahead. With a single motion, the guards unlocked it and threw him inside. He hit the cold stone floor hard, barely catching himself before his face met the unyielding ground. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing like a final verdict. Darkness. Then a voice. "You should be dead." Kane pushed himself up onto his elbows. The chamber was dim, but he could make out a silhouette standing near the far wall. A figure draped in flowing black fabric, her presence almost ethereal against the faint luminescence of the chamber's alien architecture. "Xalara." He exhaled slowly, brushing dust from his uniform. "Yeah, well, humanity is full of surprises." A pause. Then she stepped forward, closer than before, closer than any living being outside the Dominion had ever been to her. Kane kept his breathing steady as she tilted her head, studying him like an anomaly in a controlled experiment. He wasn't sure what he expected. Cold fury? Indifference? Some supernatural force that would crush him on the spot. Instead, her voice was soft, curious. "What did you see?" Kane smiled, a slow, knowing grin that only deepened the mystery. And for the first time in her life, Xalara did not know whether to fear it. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken questions. Kane remained seated on the cold floor, back against the stone wall, watching Xalara as she stood before him. Even in the dim light, the air around her felt heavy, charged with something deeper than authority. He had been in interrogation rooms before, had faced warlords, spies, and alien diplomats who could kill with a single word. But none of them had ever looked at him the way Xalara did now. Not with anger, not with contempt, but with curiosity. She took another step forward, the faint shimmer of her veil catching the low light. "No one has ever survived looking upon me." Kane shrugged. "Guess I'm just lucky." A pause. A subtle shift in the air. He could tell she wasn't satisfied with that answer. "You mock what you do not understand." Not mocking, just thinking. He let his head rest back against the stone, eyes never leaving her. "If no one survives seeing you, then how do the stories spread? How does anyone know what happens?" Xalara said nothing. Kane's mind worked fast, piecing together fragments of history, cultural fear, and the reactions he had seen in the council chamber. He had been sent here to learn the truth, but he hadn't expected to become part of it. "You hesitated back there," he said finally. "When I looked at you." "Why?" This time, it was she who did not answer right away. Kane had seen hesitation before, in soldiers about to break, in leaders weighing impossible choices. He recognized it now. She wasn't debating whether to kill him. She was questioning something she had never questioned before. "I do not hesitate," she said at last, but the words felt practiced, as if she had told herself that more than anyone else. Kane smirked. "Then why am I still alive?" Xalara's fingers twitched at her sides, barely perceptible. "You assume much." "I assume what makes sense," Kane countered. "No one, no one, would risk bringing me here unless there was doubt. If I was truly an offense to your people, I'd be dead already. But instead you're here, talking to me." She turned slightly, her gaze shifting toward the shadows. "There are things you do not understand, human." Kane leaned forward. "Then help me understand." The words hung between them, heavier than before. Xalara remained still for a long moment. Then, without a word, she reached up, pressing her fingers lightly to the edge of her veil. A heartbeat passed. Then another. Kane didn't move, didn't breathe. A fraction of an inch. That was all. But for the first time, he saw something beneath the veil. A shimmer. A distortion. Not a face, not flesh, but something else. A sudden spike of energy crackled through the air, like the hum before a storm. His muscles tensed instinctively, but he forced himself to stay still. Xalara let the veil drop back into place and exhaled softly. Kane stared, his mind racing. "That wasn't—" "You saw nothing," she cut in, her voice sharp now. "And that is how it must remain." He shook his head slowly. "That wasn't a curse. That wasn't death or madness. That was—" She stepped back. "Enough." "No," Kane pushed. "I've spent my life unraveling lies. And that," he gestured toward her, "wasn't a monster's face. Was it?" Xalara hesitated again. This time, she did not deny it. The air between them burned with something unspoken. Then the door behind her slid open. A figure loomed in the entrance, one of the High Council's enforcers. Cold, expressionless. But his voice was filled with something dangerous. "The Council has decided." His gaze flickered to Kane. "He dies at dawn." Kane exhaled. "Of course I do." But his eyes weren't on the enforcer. They were on Xalara. Because for the first time since he had arrived, she looked at him not with curiosity, but with uncertainty. Kane sat on the cold floor of his cell, back against the wall, staring at the heavy obsidian door that sealed his fate. The air was thick, charged with an unspoken finality. He had been sentenced. Execution at dawn. The Viator didn't waste time with drawn-out trials or pointless negotiations. He had broken their most sacred law, and now they would erase him. He should have been afraid, maybe even furious. Instead, he was curious. Because of her. Princess Xalara. She had stood there when they pronounced his death, her face hidden as always, but her silence had been deafening. He had watched her closely, and in that fleeting moment, he had seen something no one else had. Hesitation. That meant something. Kane exhaled slowly, glancing at the dim glow of the cell's overhead light. The Viator were efficient in their fear. No grand speeches, no torment, just the cold inevitability of execution. But if he had learned one thing about the galaxy, it was that every system had a flaw. And right now Xalara was the flaw. The lock outside his cell clicked. His pulse remained steady as the door slid open with a near-silent hiss. A shadow moved beyond the threshold, stepping inside without hesitation. The door sealed behind her. Xalara. For the first time, she was here alone, no guards, no advisors, just her. She stood there in silence, the air between them thick with things neither of them dared to say. Kane smirked. Didn't expect a royal visit before my execution. Not exactly standard diplomatic protocol. Her voice was soft, but the weight behind it was undeniable. You should not be alive. That makes two of us. Kane pushed himself to his feet, closing the space between them. Yet here we are. A moment passed. Then something changed. Xalara lifted her hands, reaching for the veil that had never once been removed in the presence of another. He felt the shift in the air, the faint ripple of energy brushing against his skin. Then, for the first time, she lowered it. Kane's breath caught. Not from fear, not from horror, but from something far more dangerous. She was not a monster. Not in the way the legends whispered. Not in the way civilizations feared. Her face was luminous, shifting, neither fully physical nor entirely energy. It was like looking at a living star, a swirling cosmos woven into the shape of something almost human, but infinitely more. It was beauty, raw and unfiltered, but also power, a power so vast it could break the minds of those unprepared to comprehend it. And yet, Kane did not falter. His mind did not shatter. His body did not collapse. He simply looked. Xalara watched him carefully, waiting for the inevitable. But it did not come. Slowly, Kane exhaled. That's it. That's what the galaxy fears. Her gaze sharpened. You do not understand. Then help me. His voice was steady. Because I'm not seeing a curse. I'm seeing something hidden, something controlled. Xalara's fingers twitched at her sides, as if she wanted to deny it. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, the Dominion's greatest fear is not my face, Captain Kane. He frowned. Then what is it? A pause. A moment that could shatter empires. Then, in a voice so quiet it was barely above a breath, she said, the truth. The chamber lights flickered. And outside, the Dominion's forces prepared for his execution. The truth. Kane had spent his entire life hunting it down, unraveling deceptions woven by kings, warlords, and bureaucrats who thrived on secrecy. But never had he stood so close to something that could shake the foundation of an empire. Xalara held his gaze, her veil still lowered, her celestial face reflecting the dim glow of the chamber's lights. The swirling patterns of energy in her skin, the impossible depth in her shifting eyes. Asterisk, asterisk, this was what the Vithur Dominion feared. Asterisk, asterisk, not a curse. Not madness, but revelation. He exhaled slowly, letting the moment stretch between them. So, what now? Her fingers twitched at her sides, the barest sign of uncertainty. You were meant to die the moment you looked upon me. That is the law. Yeah, Kane said, rolling his shoulders, but I didn't. She studied him carefully, as if she expected him to suddenly collapse, to convulse, to scream as the weight of her existence crushed him. When none of that happened, something flickered behind her expression. Doubt. The first crack in the Dominion's absolute certainty. Kane took a slow step forward. I don't think your people have been telling the whole story. She didn't move away. You assume deception. But what if they truly believe it? Then someone asterisk asterisk a long time ago asterisk asterisk made sure they did. Xalara hesitated. That was the moment Kane knew. She had always questioned, maybe in the quiet of her mind, maybe in the stolen moments between duty and fear. But deep down, something inside her had never fully accepted what she had been told about herself. And now, for the first time, she had proof. Kane wasn't dead. He wasn't broken. He wasn't a mindless husk. He was fine, which meant the greatest truth of the Vithur Dominion was built on a lie. A sharp chime echoed through the chamber. Xalara's posture stiffened. They come for you? Kane smirked. Of course they do. Her gaze flickered to the door, then back to him. There was a war in her expression, a struggle between everything she had been taught and everything she had just witnessed. You can still walk away, she said quietly. If I return you to the council, they may not execute you. They may. Re-educate me? Wipe my memory? Keep me locked away? Kane shook his head. You know they can't let me leave. Not now. Xalara was silent. Outside, the sound of armored footsteps echoed through the corridor. Time was running out. Kane took a breath. This isn't just about me, Princess. It's about you. About why they made your face a myth. About what they're really afraid of. He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. What happens if your people see you and don't die? What happens if they realize they never had to fear you in the first place? The sound of unlocking mechanisms clicked through the door's frame. Xalara closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them again, something had changed. She turned to the control panel on the wall, moving faster than he expected. A series of commands flashed across the interface. Kane tensed, ready for anything. Then the doors sealed from the inside. Alarms erupted through the palace. Xalara turned to him, her voice steady, final. Run? Kane blinked. Excuse me? Go, she said sharply. Before I change my mind. Kane grinned. You sure you're not the reckless one here? A flicker of something almost like amusement passed over her expression. Then it was gone. Kane moved fast, slipping through a hidden corridor she opened in the chamber wall. He didn't know where it led. He didn't care, because now he had something more valuable than survival. He had the truth. The alarms screamed through the palace, their piercing wail shaking the very foundation of the Dominion's seat of power. Kane moved fast, his instincts honed from years of slipping through war zones and hostile territories. The hidden passage Xalara had opened was narrow, dark, its walls humming with alien energy conduits. He didn't know where it led, but he knew one thing for certain. Asterisk, asterisk, he couldn't stop, asterisk, asterisk. Not now. Not after everything. The Dominion's greatest secret wasn't a curse. It wasn't a monster hidden beneath a veil. It was a lie. And Kane was about to carry that truth out of the heart of their empire. Behind him, the sound of pursuit grew. The Viethur weren't just mobilizing soldiers. They were panicked. He could hear it in the clipped voices barking orders through the palace comms, the way the security lockdowns were activating too slowly for a civilization that prided itself on control. They had never prepared for this moment because they had never believed it could happen. Xalara had changed everything. He reached a junction, pausing just long enough to scan his surroundings. The passage split in 3 directions. One led deeper underground. A dead end. The second hummed with a faint blue glow, the signature of a teleportation conduit. Not an escape, but a direct route back into the palace's main halls. Suicide. That left the third. A narrow maintenance corridor leading upward. He took it. The air grew thinner as he climbed, the gravity shift suggesting he was nearing the palace's outer levels. His muscles burned, but he forced himself forward, just a little farther. Then ahead of him, asterisk, asterisk, a door, asterisk, asterisk, not the reinforced security barriers of the palace interior, but a smaller exit, likely meant for technicians and maintenance crews. He reached for the control panel, fingers moving on instinct. A hand grabbed his wrist. He spun, striking out in reflex, but the grip didn't tighten. It didn't counter. Xalara. She had followed him. Alone. Her veil was back in place, but the weight of her presence was different now. Before, she had been a figure of untouchable myth, a creature that entire civilizations feared without question. Now, she was standing on the edge of choosing her own fate. You're going to make it out, she said, voice unreadable. Kane raised a brow. You sure about that? Because your people are trying pretty damn hard to turn me into a scorch mark. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she moved past him, placing her palm against the control panel. The door hissed, unlocking. Beyond it, the pale blue of a Viethur night stretched out over the capital, a skyline of impossible spires cutting through the darkness. And hovering just above the city, his ship. The Nomad was there, its sleek Terran design a stark contrast against the alien architecture. A signal beacon blinked from its underbelly. His crew had gotten the message. They were waiting. Cain turned to Xalara. "Come with me." She stilled. "That is not possible." "It is." He took a step closer. "You don't have to be their symbol anymore. You don't have to be their lie." For a moment, something flickered beneath the surface of her unreadable expression. The alarm still blared. The Dominion forces were closing in. Every second counted. But this choice, her choice, was bigger than time. "Finally," she whispered. "Not yet." Cain clenched his jaw, frustrated, but he didn't push. He knew what this was. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. But the crack had been made. And cracks always grew. He nodded once. "Then make them afraid, Princess." Her gaze met his. A single moment of understanding. Then Cain turned and ran. The night swallowed him as he sprinted toward the Nomad. Behind him, Xalara disappeared into the palace shadows, her veil back in place, her legend still intact for now. But the Dominion had changed forever, because someone had looked upon the forbidden and lived.